Excellent. I see us live on our YouTube page, and then it does also look like we're live on our Facebook channel as well. So I will follow the main thing that we always do, which is try and wait a couple minutes for Facebook. Sorry, I was distracted a little bit for Facebook to alert people that we are all on live and ready to get started.
Very cool.
Great, and I do see a couple of you are already starting to tune in. You should know the drill of engaging with this video. You can like, you can comment, feel free to start sharing this out. And again, we'll just wait about a minute or so just before we get it really going and started. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Happy Monday morning to you all. Thank you for hopping on to our broadcast, whether you are stepping in for a few minutes or logging on for the whole time, or even watching this at a later point in your day, afternoon, or evening. I want to thank you for taking the time to get updated on things that are going on in our city and for being an engaged resident, business owner, or whoever else that may be interested in Westminster. I am Juliette Abdel, your Westminster Chamber President and CEO. And every week we always kick off the week with some city updates. And we've been able to have it rotate from our mayor to our mayor pro tem to other councilors and even our interim city manager, Andrews, who've given us a different lens of what's going on, different perspective, and they're able to answer questions a little bit uniquely and differently. Now, you should know the drill behind this. If you are a returning viewer with us, then you know that you can start hitting the share button on this video so others in your network can see that we're live and can also be engaging with us. We always welcome comments and questions in the chat section. Of course, anything that is targeted or aggressive, I will not be displaying. But if you react to the video, whether it's a thumbs up or a heart, or any of those emojis, we can see who is engaged with us and can give you some of those shout outs along the way. If you are a first-time viewer onto our broadcast, then I hope that you continue to come into the future. And a couple ways that you can do that. You can hit the like button on this Facebook page and the notifications or follow button beside that so you can be alerted when we go live. Or you can also hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel where this is currently being streamed, and you can be alerted when the video is actually about to get started and then once it's been complete. So you get kind of 2 alerts through YouTube. We're on all major social media platforms, so if you did not already know, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Westy Chamber. We're on LinkedIn, Westminster Chamber of Commerce, and our website, if you have not ever gone to it before, which I know all of you have, right? westminsterchamber.biz, quickly flashing it on the screen for you. Now, I do want to pull up some of these comments that I'm already seeing just to quickly recognize some of the folks that are with us before I introduce, of course, our awesome guest and turn this over to him. But we do have another Dave with us on the broadcast. This is Dave Carpenter giving a good morning message to the Mayor Pro Tem, myself, and everyone that is tuned into our broadcast. Thank you, Dave, for being on here this morning. We also have with us Lucy. Lucy, good morning to you. Thank you for tuning in. And I think that's a German Shepherd, right, Dave?
Looks like it.
It looks like a German Shepherd. You already touched my heart. It was one of my very first dogs that I had. So thanks for tuning in with us, Lucy. We enjoy seeing you. We have our past board chairman, Brian Head, giving us a good morning message. And MPT, I like this because I almost feel like it's MVP, the acronym for that. That's pretty cool. And our current board chairman as well, Brian Dice, has started tuning in with us, giving a good morning message your way. And mine, of course. Thank you both for being on here, both the Bryans. And we also have Councillor Seymour, who was not sick of seeing our faces for the last 3 days in a row. So good morning to you as well, Councillor Seymour. Thank you for tuning into the broadcast. So I mentioned to you all, we kick off the week with one of our locally elected officials to give updates on city, what's been going on over the last week, really any of those major important items. It won't be every single thing that's happening. And so that is where you come in. If there is something that you were desperately hoping to hear on this broadcast, or maybe you saw something or read something somewhere and you want to get that addressed, you type that into the chat section and we'll be able to address it for you along the way in between some of the comments that our Mayor Pro Tem Dave DeMott is making. Now, Dave, I'm very excited, always am excited to have all of you on here, but I'm enthused to see you on here with us today, especially since I know that you've stayed busy this past weekend. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. Thank you, Juliet. Thanks for continuing to host these. I think they're very good value add for both the business and the community at large. So I appreciate you allowing us all the opportunity to talk with your audience. Like you said, we've kind of seen each other quite a bit over the weekend with strategic planning. I'll back up a little bit, though, just and share Monday night. We did have a council meeting last Monday, and it was the final meeting of January, as we won't be meeting tonight. So if you're somebody who comes and joins our meetings, you're going to have to find something else because we have the night off. And that's typical with the fifth. If there's a month that has a fifth Monday, sometimes if we have a lot going on, they might put an extra meeting. But after a strategic planning weekend, we decided that was probably enough of seeing each other, to Councillor Seymour's point. And he did say that he didn't want to see us again for a while. But I appreciate him tuning in. And so last week at the meeting, we did a land use rezoning for property on 104th and Sheridan. So if you want to go see details in our agendas about that, or go listen to the meeting, it was lengthy, as most land use issues are. We also had a lengthy discussion around water. I know that if you've been following us, water is certainly a priority of this council. And as far as what the future holds for water rates, we recently did basically matched tier 3 to the same price as tier 2, essentially temporarily doing away with that tier 3, or at least for the time being, as we look at an overall solution. And I know there's been a lot of talk from the community that they want to see relief across all the tiers. And I can assure you that the council is working very hard and diligently with the staff to figure out what that might look like, as well as figure out what the plan forward is, because I think we all agree that maintaining our utility and providing safe drinking water and meeting all the standards and exceeding them, as we usually do as a city, is important to this council. So the big discussion that went to probably, I think, about 2:00 in the morning last Monday. So and that kind of carried us over into our strategic planning, which Juliet was nice enough to attend all weekend. And so it's 2 full days where the council talks about what our priorities are. We revamped or started revamping this council's mission statement compared to the prior council, as well as guiding principles and talking through what we had, what we wanted to enhance, or if there were things we wanted to remove or keep. And so it's an interesting process, especially when you have 7 individuals going through and trying to figure out what things they believe their constituents want them to focus on. And, then you got to kind of pare them down. By the end of the weekend, you got to figure out what's consensus or majority of 4 people, that things that are going to stay on the list, which is, I think there's always things that each member end up not getting on the list. And that's kind of the way the process goes, because we can't do everything. And council ultimately's authority lays with the power of 4 votes. And I think we did a good job, though, in my opinion. I think the big topics were very well covered by the overwhelming majority of council, where we had a lot of agreement through the weekend. And I know you saw that, Juliet. And so I think that's promising when you have a new council. And I've been on long enough that I've went through a couple election cycles, as well as some cycles where we had people elected to higher office and we got appointed members. So I've done this exercise with a handful of new members in my 5 years. And I could say this year, and even honestly last year, have been kind of some of the more cohesive times that we've done it. I really like the facilitation group that we use this year, and we used them last year. And I think they did as good of a job as they can, keeping 7 politicians on point, and making sure that we were focused and not going down too many rabbit holes. But I think one of the big takeaways that you'll see as we move down the path of our strategic plan is a lot of talk about core services. As we spoke a little bit ago, water being one of the most important ones in our utility, streets, a lot of emphasis on enhancing public safety and addressing the rise of crime that we've seen both nationally, and we have not, unfortunately, been able to escape that as a city either. So we're going to address that moving forward. A lot of discussion around homelessness. I know that you were going to share the link. People can go and watch that whole weekend if you need some bedtime YouTube, as well as there is some agenda slides. I will say that those slides, if you go look at them, they're from the first day, and those kind of morphed over the weekend. And the second day, they brought back some enhanced slides that aren't posted yet. As that work product gets kind of condensed, and they take our thoughts and put it to paper, and we approve our overall strat plan, you'll be able to see more of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, for running through that all very quickly. I know we have several folks that have started tuning in with us, like Emilio, even see Parker Brown giving a quick good morning remark our way. For those of you that are hopping on with us on the broadcast, we have Mayor Pro Tem DeMott giving updates from what has transpired from the last time we held a broadcast, which was we actually did it last Tuesday because of MLK Day. That was before that. Of course, through the weekend when a strat plan was held. Now, one of the items that Mayor Pro Tem DeMott had mentioned was that this YouTube video, so this year, they were able to film in real time the actual broadcast of the strategic plan. So this was based on some requests that were made at City Council, and staff kind of got it together and were able to put it together. And you can find that on the YouTube channel if you haven't already gone to it before. That is where you can watch those 2 days. It did start on Saturday, and it went through until a little over half the day on Sunday as well. So it is a lengthier broadcast. You can always, the great thing for you is that you can break it down into not all in one chunk, which the counselors did not have the opportunity of doing and had to do it all at once. The other item that Mayor Pro Tem DeMott referenced, of course, was also the agenda, where you can find the PowerPoint that they had walked through and some of the items that they were also provided as input from community members or residents. I know the chamber had submitted a couple of items for consideration as well. And so that's all can be found for you on the agenda section on the City of Westminster's page. Now, there were a couple of quick comments that were made, Mayor Pro Tem, that I want to pull up, and then I'll probably ask you a few things just to kind of lay the ground for some folks that may not be familiar with that process. But Dave Carpenter did quickly comment. I lied when I said quickly because it's a paragraph long, but he commented and wanted to commend you and the mayor, of course, council, for a great strategic planning retreat this weekend, that he watched it all on YouTube, that the discussion was on point and was important in revising the mission statement. He also said that it continued to create a clear vision for the role of the city government moving forward. And so he just wanted to reemphasize that well done approach. And, I was going to say, Mayor Pro Tem DeMont, I'm like thrown off because there's 2 dates, but Mayor Pro Tem DeMont, was this the first time that the city was able to do this live broadcast at the same time that the strategic plan was going on, or has it historically been an attempt that wasn't really, didn't come to fruition?
Historically, it has not been broadcast. However, it's not the first time because during COVID, we had no choice but to do things remotely, and so that's kind of where we've started morphing and looking at technology to be able to do this. So last year, and I think that the year prior, so 2020, we did some of these kind of meetings where they were semi-cast, and then that's evolved since COVID started. And so we've been getting better and better. And actually, if you look at what part of the allocation with the ARPA funds was to update things inside of City Hall and City Council chambers specifically in order to enhance the way that we're delivering our meetings to people, because people now have kind of some expectations about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've set the precedent for it now moving forward to try and be able to accommodate for those various needs. And, before we hopped on together, we were joking briefly. And I was like, man, I can't get enough of you guys. Third day, because there were a lot of folks that there were a few that came in and then rotated off. I know they had other obligations or other things, or found it more comfortable to be in their home without having to wear that mask and be there that whole time. So just allowing that flexibility for people to participate, I think, was something that was very well received by the public. We also had a quick comment that was made by Brian Head, and it was regarding IT. And so one of the things that people may not know about our Mayor Pro Tem DeMont is that you are an IT professional that's in our area, and that there has been discussion leading up to the strategic plan about those challenges with the live streaming. And there have also been issues during regular council meetings as well, council and study sessions that continue to have that hybrid approach to attending in person or tuning in from your home. Are there things that you would like to see the city implement maybe to improve technology moving forward, or is that something that we're kind of stuck with?
Yeah, I saw this question. I actually very much appreciate the opportunity to address this. So Councillor Azadi very much pushed to have it live streamed. And initially I was not in favor, and I'd like to explain why. Historically, I've been very in favor of us having things posted to our website and as open as possible. Back before I was even on council, I used to go get study sessions because they didn't used to be posted the way they are today. They used to be, they record them, but you'd have to, if you wanted one, you'd have to go in and they'd put them on a thumb drive for you. And I used to listen to them at work while I was pursuing being involved with being on city council. And one year they wanted to charge me for them because they said, oh, it's a lot of staff time. And I'm like, well, they should be, online anyway because it's public information. So historically, I'm very in favor of being online. My concern came in with we're getting better at it, and in the council chambers they've put a lot of like I said, a lot into. They even have some staff that are specifically tasked with those meetings, because if you've paid attention to our meetings, we do have AV problems. Mm-hmm. And my concern going into strategic planning, it's never actually at the same facility, and you see how many issues they have where they're set up for it. We're not necessarily set up for it at our rec centers where we usually do offsite planning. And last year we had some struggles with the technology that got in the way of the meeting. And you sitting through the whole meeting, you see there's a lot of stuff to pack into the weekend. And my hesitancy was I didn't want it to get in the way of our planning, because it's just too important. And we have some really heavy lifts that we as a council have to make some agreement on and move forward. I mean, we even, we're at the point where we have to hire a new city manager. We got to figure out the water stuff. There's just a lot of big things going on where I didn't want it to get in the way. And I have to say, I'm very pleased, though, for those that pushed past my concerns, and the staff really delivered a very good solution. And so I would hope that they continue to enhance that. I know that we have some asks as a council. Right now, we each have a laptop that sits in front of us that's there just so that you can look at my face. And I don't personally like that. Like, they have the room cameras I like better, just because it gets distracting, because then you're like, especially like, I don't know if you've ever heard before a meeting, Councilor Emmons likes to make sure that we turn our cameras on in sync, because if not, if I'm off sync, I might be looking at the mayor while she's talking, but my camera looks like I'm looking away from her, so it looks like we're ignoring each other. So we've asked for some improvements on some of that stuff, and I know that staff is working on it, but that's a lot of information. But that's been just one of those silver linings of COVID, that we've really learned how to do things remotely. We have a lot of opportunities if somebody gets sick that they still can participate, or if we're in a heightened sense of infection rates, that we can have less people involved but still be in person. So a lot of moving parts, but I anticipate that's going to continue to improve. And I know, actually, talking to City Manager Andrews, they have some things coming that they're working on to address some of the problems that we've had, but also some of the things that'll make it a little less of a distraction for council, because I think that's important too. We want to be focused on what our colleagues are saying, what the public is saying, and not having to worry about like, oh, what's that spot on my shirt? So
yeah. For sure. I can imagine it being distracting. I know all of us, especially in the digital world nowadays, we start looking at ourselves more than, the person that's in front of us. And it does, it takes away from some robust discussion and maybe throws you off in even conversation pieces. I see Lisa Culpepper, Adams County Treasurer. Thank you for tuning in with us this morning. We have Mayor Pro Tem DeMont giving us some updates, who has answering a couple of questions. Mayor Pro Tem DeMont, I want to take a step back. For people that are just now starting to engage in this process of a strategic plan and may not be familiar with the components of it, can you share with them how often that's done by the city, really what goes into it? I know that they can access the agenda and they'll see the content that you went over specifically, but what were some of the steps leading up to it, or and maybe what is expected in the future if they wanted to try and engage in that process?
Sure. So they kind of go, we kind of do some level of planning every year, and then we do a budget retreat, which is typically every 2 years, that coincides with strategic planning. And a lot of the setup work is just, having meetings where they will actually, so the facilitating group that you use, and we use Barry Dunn is who we're using right now. They will contact each member of council and they'll individually interview us. And they did that portion. We did a pre-meeting to this one where we went over our protocols, and they had did interviews with us each at that point too. And if you heard them talking about what kind of hat we are, what that exercise was is how we talk to each other and how we listen to information. You'll have to excuse me. I have that's my green light, and it turns off whenever I'm sitting down too long. But anyway, they talk about how we consume information and communication, and how we give it so that we can work better with our colleagues. So there's a lot of these different meetings that go in beforehand, and then we go to this big weekend where we do strategic planning. There's also components of public input that you do. You heard them talk about like a spot, what do they call it? A pinpoint survey that they do with the number of residents to just get like some bullet point kind of things that people are thinking about. But they also then lean on our 2-year citizen survey that we do every 2 years, and we're leading into a new one that'll go out this year. So they take all that public information and they kind of build us a packet, and then we start going through what's the strategic plan from a year ago, and we look at how that fits this current council. And so then next year, they do that now. Next year we'll come back and say, okay, are we on track with like the action items that came out of the strategic planning, and where are those at? Are they still relevant? Do we have new things we want to add? So it's a pretty in-depth, entailed process if you've never gone through. And I know you obviously have. I'm sure that the chamber, probably you guys do your own strategic planning how often do you guys do it? Yearly or?
Right. So it's yearly. We have our kind of a broader long-term objective plan that's in place. And then every year we kind of update our strategic plan with those objectives and priorities that we really want to address kind of as a program of work for that year. And it's funny because ours was this past Thursday. So we put the final touches on ours this past Thursday, and then you guys had yours on Saturday. It very seldom ever aligns that way, that we are in sync with city and chamber on that stuff. But it's really, I think, relevant for people to know that these are organizations, including the city, that are making sure that we're setting ourselves up in a timely manner of addressing things that are coming forward as concerns by our residents and members that we represent as well.
Yeah, I really geek out on the strategic planning stuff because I worked for a company that is in Westminster now, and I worked for them, they were in Denver and then they moved to Westminster. They're called the Alternative Board, and their whole purpose is to work with small, medium-sized businesses who don't have their own board, and they work with non-competing business owners to basically build strategic plans so that you're kind of helping each other be accountable to a strategic plan and say, what's your 3 to 5 year goals, or even further down the road, like what's your exit strategy for your business, and like at what point are you going to sell. So like I enjoy the process, but I mean it's a lot of work and a lot of nuance, especially you have in our instance with a government, you have 7 people who are bringing different priorities they've heard from their constituents. In a business setting, it's usually 7 different departments who are fighting over one bucket of money. So very similar, but a little different, probably a little more passion around it in politics and in government than there are in personal business, just because at the end of the day I get to go home, and that's not you want your business to be successful, but that might not, you're not tied to it the same way, I guess.
No, it's absolutely, it's different for sure, and you're there representing as best as you can the entire community instead of your individual role and your department role and your interests. So it does make sense. And the Alternative Board, it was a great group. I know we've worked with them after we visited about it, Dave, and they bring in some very great ideas and support for those businesses that haven't followed that before. So we had a full day on Saturday, and then really Sunday was more than half a day. I would have said it was another full day. We were just shy of that. But what's the next steps? I mean, does this everything that was discussed on Sunday and Saturday, is that the holy grail? Like, is that if anyone was tuned in, was writing frantically or taking screenshots or doing, I mean, is that what they should be going out there spreading right now? Or is there another step that's coming up?
That's a great question. And there will be another step. And so basically we kind of went through the things that we said were priorities after we went through mission statement, guiding principles. They're going to take what they think they heard from us. They're going to wordsmith it. And then they're going to bring that back to us. And then we're going to either say, yeah, you got it, or no, we want some tweaks before it's, here's what the public can expect. We're going to, put that lens of vision statement and mission statement and guiding principles against everything we do, as well as the priorities that we put forward. The exercise we went through that Juliet was able to watch is basically we had things that we talked about through the weekend, and we broke into small groups. And at the end of it, we had to come up with what things were going to stay on the list. And, there's only so many staff hours in the day that they can accomplish things we give them. So we have to prioritize what those are. And so the way that we did it this time is anything that got at least 3 members of council to vote on it, it will come back to us. The things that didn't make that much, they're going to make a list so that we can keep those. So maybe potentially we can revisit them, at the end of this year, beginning of next year when we do strategic planning, but they're at least notated. So, that they're still listed as something that at least a member of council gave support to, potentially 2 members. And then when those come back, same kind of thing. We're got to look at those, and did you capture them the way that we were thinking? And then say yay or nay. And then from there, staff actually takes those things and starts building actual action plans around them. Like, what things are they going to do that support that, goal that we gave? And so, like, a good example is there were a lot of things that came up in public safety that, as we looked at them, they rolled up into really what we equated to, building a stronger public safety departments that would, be a place that people would want to come work. And so, those things will get rolled up, and they'll decide which of those things really meet that overall goal and help us achieve it. The other one where there was a big roll up from, I think it was like 5 bullet points to 1 bullet point was as we look at mitigating risks, say for fires. I mean, obviously that's on everybody's mind in the metro area, the way that the fires in Marshall spread. And with so many open space and trails in between all of our homes, I think that's on people's minds. So, how we're going to make sure that we're doing a good job of mitigating that risk. And that was put out a couple different ways and rolled up into one thing. And so they're going to bring those things back. And then we have to go through that final approval before that's kind of marching orders of staff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I know it's quite a bit to digest if you have not done this process before, or even if you have gone through a strategic process, each one is different. And so to understand the components of what happened before this weekend, so folks know that it wasn't just showing up and here were random things that you guys talked about. There was groundwork that was done beforehand to try and bring into the discussion. And then I love that you explained that voting process to people. And I think that's one of those things as a key takeaway for anyone that may not see something come forward that was mentioned in a meeting. It's not to say that it's not of importance to the counselors that were there. It was not as a priority in comparison to something else that was there and their opinion and based off of their feedback that they've heard. And so the last thing I always want to reiterate is sometimes when we don't see something right or we hear a topic and we're like, why wasn't this brought forward, or this person is anti this or that, that's not the case. This system that was there and this mechanism for really having that dialogue and talking about it was to help with figuring out what can be done in the time period that they have before coming back, of course, in the following year and seeing if those other priorities were done. So
Yeah, and I would add to that, the other thing is there's some of those things that end up being easy things that staff might already be doing or they could just do. Whereas if it's in the list of things that I'm saying these are the top 10 priorities and we only get a certain amount that we could do, there are some things that might be on those lists that end up happening because they're really easy things to do, or they're things that are already in place. And so I think there was a lot of that I heard that maybe didn't get my attention because I know it's something we're already accommodating. And so that's the other thing that they'll do is they'll take the things that are on the current strategic plan, see how they match up, and if they still fit a bucket of this council, and then we'll have some decision points whether or not we want to drop them off or not. So they'll go through that too and see the things that are already on their plate that have been from last year's strategic plan. Do they stay? Do they go? Are they already complete? So that's another piece of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for explaining that in length. I know you answered a couple of questions for us and some comments that were there. And I know I've also kept you over and you fit me into your day that's back to back. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I want to thank all of you that have been on here with us and make sure that you continue to share this message out. If you rewatch this and you replay it and you weren't on, give us the hashtag replay. And if you had a question that you didn't feel comfortable typing into the chat, you can always DM the page or reach out to us so we can get that question over to our Mayor Pro Tem. And Mayor Pro Tem Demott, stay with me until we fully exit, but I thank you so much for being part of the broadcast and for spending the weekend really engaging and making sure that you were doing your part in representing the voices that you're hearing.
Yep. No, thank you for joining us.
Of course. Have a great day, everyone.